Now we can really do the trade thing. Because before, it was, all offseason, was they need size, athleticism, this and that. Then they struggled to start the year, and it was, do you even want to make a trade?
Yeah.
With this, do you want to give up assets to just maybe get to a 500? But now they're a couple games over 500, and we're seeing Cam Johnson in trade rumors still.
Mm-hmm.
John Collins' name has come up a lot recently. Where do things stand? Let's start with one. Where are things with Cam Johnson right now that you know?
Okay, so
or that you think?
I continue to hear from sources that like that deal could be had. It's just the Kings have to give up a better draft pick. That the Nets are not going to take 2 years of Kevin Huerter or a year and a half of Kevin Huerter and a bad draft pick for Cam Johnson.
Sure.
And that you'd have to figure out the rest of the financials, like, which aren't that difficult.
Mm.
Like if the Kings want to remain a tax-paying team, a non-tax-paying team, then Trey Lyles could go in the deal. If not, again, the Kings have, multiple minimum scale contracts that they could throw in, whether it's Doug McDermott or Jordan McLaughlin or Colby Jones or Alex Len, to make money work with a trade.
Mm-hmm.
And so like you can pull off that trade without including Trey Lyles.
Sure.
But you're going to have to give up at least, I believe the Nets want an unprotected first round pick, and the Kings are balking at that. They want a lottery protected pick from what I've heard. And there should be some ground there somewhere, maybe a top 3 protected pick in year 1. So that would be like kind of where like the Kings and the Nets have to come to some sort of agreement. There are other teams that are interested in Cam Johnson, so you easily could miss out on him if this is the way it goes. But I think that there's also a door open where, we saw Evan Sittery put out a tweet this weekend that the Kings have a plan A and a plan B, and plan A is Cam Johnson, and plan B is to switch to John Collins.
Okay.
So I spent an obscene amount of time this weekend mulling over both players and looking at all the stats and looking at defensive stats and all of the numbers. And
that email drop from Kings Beat was a long one.
It was long. Yeah. So when I decided dive into something like that, usually I do go really long form and try to give you multiple angles.
Sure. Can I, real quick, I want you to continue, but typically what happens is when I get an email from the Kings Beat, I just, when I can, I'll stop and I'll skim it if it's something that I know that we already talked about, or I'll at least give it. That one I started to skim it was like, oh, all right. Walked over to the couch and sat down and all right, buckling in for this one.
And you just barely got through part of the Cam Johnson.
Yeah.
Right up.
Correct.
Yeah. So when you're comparing two players, I think it's really interesting. John Collins was drafted in 2017. Right, he's part of the incredible 2017 draft class, which includes De'Aaron Fox #5, but Jason Tatum at number 3, I believe.
2.
No, Lonzo's 2.
I thought Tatum was 3.
I believe Tatum's 3.
What's his name? Josh Jackson. Josh Jackson was 4.
Josh Jackson's 4.
4, got it.
So it goes Markelle Fultz, and then Lonzo Ball, then Jason Tatum. And the Kings had moved in that draft. They were the number 8 seed pre-lottery. They moved to number 3, but because of a pick swap, dropped to number 5. And so there's all kinds of crazy stuff that happens in that draft. But then the Kings took the 10th pick in the draft, which ends up being your favorite player, Zach Collins. And instead of just drafting a number 10, they traded it for 15 and 20. So this is crazy.
Smart move to not have Zach Collins in your uniform.
Well, not really.
Great work by the Kings.
That's true. But the 11th pick is Malik Monk. The 13th
got him
pick.
Anyway.
The 13th pick is Donovan Mitchell. The 14th pick is Bam Adebayo.
Nah, trash.
And then the Kings draft
all these awesome players.
At number 15, where they take Justin Jackson. Well, you keep going in that draft, and number 19 is John Collins. And number 20 is where the Kings select Harry Giles. Number 22 is OG Anunoby. But number 27, I believe, is Kyle Kuzma. And so Kyle Kuzma had come in for a draft workout out of the University of
Utah.
Utah State, right? Is it Utah or Utah State?
Go on.
I think it's
I'll
Utah.
confirm here
I
in a
think you're
moment.
right. I think it's Nemias who went to Utah State. Anyway, he comes
Confirmed Utah.
and just his head coach, just so everyone knows, his head coach at the time was Larry Krystowiak, which is like a power forward in the late 80s and early 90s for like the
Sure.
Bulls and a couple other teams.
Yeah,
Like
totally.
Larry Krystowiak, well, he goes on to become a minor league head coach with all of the guys at on Dave Yeager's staff and Dave Yeager. So Dave Yeager and most of his staff guys had worked their way through the minor leagues to get to the NBA.
And that's not the G League. We're talking like podunk, small town,
real crazy stuff where you traded players for a steak dinner. Yeah. Like Dave Yeager and I believe Dwayne Tickner had pulled off a trade for a steak dinner one time.
That's so good.
So anyway, they had all worked together. They all knew Larry Krystowiak. Krystowiak calls and says, "Hey, my kid is amazing. You need to bring him in." So Kuzma comes in, just demolishes Justin Jackson and the rest of the players. And they're like, "Oh, we got to get this kid." And then they pass on him, not once with the 5th pick, not twice with the 15th, not 3 times with the 20th pick. Like they just kept passing on him. And then he goes on to be a good player. John Collins, again, goes number 19 in that draft. So my point is that John Collins goes number 19 in 2017 draft, right?
Mm-hmm.
2 years later, Cam Johnson gets selected like in the 20s by I think he's 21, 22, by the Phoenix Suns. Cam Johnson's drafted 2 years later and is 2 years older than
insane.
John Collins.
He was 11th. Drafted by the Timberwolves.
Okay, and then traded. Yeah. So Cam Johnson,
that's insane. He is almost 29.
Yes.
And was drafted 2 years after John Collins.
And John Collins is 27 in like 100 days. Yeah, he's like him and De'Aaron Fox and Malik Monk, they're all the same age, right? They're all the same draft. Cam Johnson is selected 2 years later and is 2 years older.
Oh, that's funny.
It's totally bizarre. So anyway, you could make an argument a couple of ways. You could say that John Collins has more overall like games played, but more mileage on the car, and that Cam Johnson came in the league later, so younger body.
Mm-hmm.
But both of them miss games. Cam Johnson misses a lot more than John Collins, and even right now, everything I've heard about John Collins' injury, his hip injury, is it has more to do with the standings than it does a hip injury, and he's not super happy with the fact that he's not playing. But he's not playing because the team he plays for does not have any interest in winning basketball games.
That sucks, dude. Can you imagine? You've worked your whole life. You have the amount of work that goes into being an NBA player from the time you were like 12 years old is just insane. Austin Rivers tells a story all the time about how he roomed with Brandon Knight on their AAU team. And Brandon Knight, at like 14 years old, was up at 5 a.m. doing push-ups and dribbling drills in the hotel room.
Yeah. Just
like
psycho.
The amount of work, and Brandon Knight might be a little different, but the amount of work it takes is insane. To get to this point, you have achieved your dream. You are an NBA player. You're John freaking Collins. You've made a ton of money. You were a first-round pick. And now the Jazz are just like, you don't get to play because we want to lose on purpose.
Yeah.
That sucks.
Well, I mean, and for John Collins, again.
Free John Collins.
He's averaging 18 points. He's averaging 8.3 rebounds, 2.5 assists. He's averaging 1.1 steals. He's averaging 0.9 blocks per game. He's shooting 43.8% from 3, 52.5% overall. John Collins is having the season that he had as like a 22, 23-year-old, where everybody in the NBA thought he was going to be a long-term NBA All-Star.
Yep.
He's having that season all over again, except for he's played in one of the last 13 games or 14. And so now you're like once again wondering, okay, is he injured or is there a reason? And realistically, everything I hear is there's not really a reason. Now, I don't know if John Collins is going to work in Sacramento.
Sure. That's something that always comes up, right? Is the role for him with the Jazz is like, you're it, dude. You got to go be that guy. How would that fit here in Sacramento?
Yeah, but I
And
think
would he maintain a proportional level of production in a smaller role?
yeah, a smaller role, exactly, right? But I still think that role is really close to there in Sacramento. Like he can play the 4 and the 5.
Mm-hmm.
He can come off the bench, which is
Mm-hmm.
where I would have him come off the bench.
Mm-hmm.
He can play alongside Domantas Sabonis because he can shoot the 3.
Yep.
Again, he's shooting 43.8% from
Mm-hmm.
3. He also can swap out for Sabonis. He's a decent passer, not a
Mm-hmm.
great passer, but a decent passer,
Mm-hmm.
and great in the pick and roll. So if you want to run him and Monk in the pick and roll, that's fine,
Mm-hmm.
right? On top of that, he averages eight plus rebounds per game for his career. I'd rather have a guy who has another skill outside of scoring
Mm-hmm.
that if I need to go get, hey, I need you to go in there. We're getting killed on the glass. I need you to go get me 5 rebounds. John Collins like, okay, I got you.
He'd also be by far their best athlete who's taller than 6'2".
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, he's a lob threat.
Yep.
Because that's, I mean, him and Trae Young were incredible with the lob in Atlanta. And then they went out and got more lob threats. And so he became like less and less important. But he would still be a great lob threat. And he has a back to the basket game. As he's grown as a player, he's gotten bigger and more physical. He's a type of physical player like I would like if I'm the Kings I'm searching for. The downfall is you're on the hook next year for $26.5 million. And he has a player option as well. So he can walk away from that. So it's kind of like when the Kings traded for Harrison Barnes the first time he signed a contract. So when he got to the end of that summer, he opted out and the Kings signed him to a long-term deal, right? The Kings could do the same thing with John Collins. If he's a good fit, you opt out and maybe you do a declining scale contract like what we saw from Harrison Barnes. I don't think John Collins is of the illusion that he's going to get another $100 million deal. But there's a possibility for him to get another $80 million deal, another 4-year, $80 million, and it starts at 23, but it goes down to like 18 in the final year. I think that's where if you're the Kings, that's a way to improve your roster greatly. You just can't get into a situation where you're paying a guy that isn't going to live up to that expectation. But
no doubt.
At 27, and the kicker is we know that Brooklyn is asking for the moon. That's not what's happening with John Collins and the Jazz. The Jazz are okay not paying him next year. The talk is 1 or 2 second-round picks. It would really help if the Kings had more second-round picks, but matching salary at least for 1 year, and then the potential to lose that most of that salary the next year, save money the next year. So, like, there are a lot of ways.
What does a deal for John Collins look like?
I mean, the easiest way to do a deal would be
that's what I'm here for.
Just straight up, it would be Trey Lyles and Kevin Huerter for John Collins. The salaries almost match. You can throw in a $2 million salary if you want. You can throw in a Colby Jones or someone just to match, fully match the salary. But he makes 26.5. You're looking at, the salary of Huerter and Lyles is right at $25 million. So that would work, right? But that also takes another chip off the board. So you wouldn't have the ability to go do anything else. And you would need John Collins to be able to play backup center, like Trey Lyles does. And so that's one like sort of issue.
He's definitely he's a better version of Trey Lyles. So you'd improve from in that respect. But I guess this gets to the next kind of layer here. If you're making a trade for me, it is you have to be acquiring better players to be sure. This is,
of course,
but I would rather you need more playable players. Right now, you have 6 that you feel great about. You're starting 5 in Keon, and then Trey Lyles is 7. And we're talking playoffs. So let's go 8-man rotation. Is it Huerter? Are you going Devin Carter in a playoff setting?
See, that's where it starts getting murky, right?
Right. And that's where if you're trading Huerter and Lyles to acquire a guy like John Collins, that leaves you at 7 still. And you've upgraded a little bit, but you still go into a postseason like they might be one guy short. And that's where when we talk about trades and acquisitions, to me, you got to find a way to get a couple of rotation players.
I agree. And that's where like a 3-team trade might get more complex, but
Sure.
that's where I'm living in a world where, again, if you're able to get 2 of the players that you want, and so again, just like really like if people can visualize this, you
Yeah.
could make a trade where you send Kevin Herter and like a $2 million player to the Brooklyn Nets.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want to give up a lottery protected pick in that situation, right? But you also would really like a player like Jonas Valanciunas.
Sure.
So now, what if I route Trey Lyles and Alex Len to the Washington Wizards for Jonas, and I route the other, let's say Colby Jones and Kevin Herter to the Brooklyn Nets? Now what I can do is I can try to balance out who's getting what.
Yeah.
So the Kings only have 1 second-round pick that they can really work with. So that goes to the Wizards because Wizards want 2 seconds when it comes to Valanciunas. Now, Brooklyn has picks as well. Can I get Brooklyn to send a second to make the Jonas Valanciunas trade work? And then by having them give up a second, is it okay now that I give up an unprotected pick? So now you're getting 2 players, but you're balancing out things in a different way. You got me?
I love that.
Yeah,
this is great.
Yeah, so these are ways in which, like, if I'm the Kings and it's all a big puzzle. You're just trying to figure out where the pieces go, and can you figure out a trade that works with Washington that maybe they get something that goes to Utah, and you can balance the financials out. And that's where, again, where the Kings and their trade exceptions, they do have all these trade exceptions. That's where those can come in handy, because you can actually give a trade exception for a player, have that player go to a different team, and so it satisfies part of the financials for the deal, but you don't have to give anything up in that deal. So again, like it's complex, and I think they do have a lot of moving pieces. I just wish they had a few more moving pieces as far as trade chips and stuff.
I think I'm ready to call that deal in, where the Kings get Valanciunas and Cam Johnson. I almost said Cam Thomas. That would just really make my heart happy. I don't think it'd be conducive to basketball success, but man, when you talk unprotected first, what year would that have to be? If you're sending an unprotected first to the Nets,
2027 or 2028.
Send it, bro.
Yeah, it would have to be.
Send it.
Yeah, it's tough though.
Is it?
Yeah, it's tough because at the end of the day, you could like fall on hard times, and if you fall on hard times, the one thing I would say is that if the Kings have this point where, let's say they have to trade De'Aaron Fox, right, where he asks out, and then you're worried that you're going to take kind of a downturn with Fox gone. In any Fox trade, you're going to get first-round picks.
Exactly.
So
multiple.
You shouldn't be all that concerned, except for your picks could be better that you're sending out than the picks that you're getting back.
I'm of the mind that let's just do 2027. That's not next year's draft, but the next year. If you have taken such a nosedive that is a top 1 pick, and it's going to cripple your franchise for the next decade that you didn't have it, you have way more problems than not having a first-round pick.
No, totally. I totally agree.
That's where, like, I get why teams don't want to do that, because, like, us talking on the radio or us talking as fans, or jumping in the chatty house or on Twitter or whatever, it's easy to just be like, give up the pick.
Yeah.
But you're also not. Teams have to have everything on the table. All options are always considered all the time. And so one of those options, no matter how minute the possibility is, hey, what if De'Aaron asks out, and when he does that, then Domas doesn't want to be here anymore, and then he asks out, and then Keegan doesn't want to sign an extension, and all this other stuff, and now, like, we're rebuilding in 2 years.
Yeah.
Again, probably not going to happen. But that's how teams have to think.
Yep.
So I get, but as a guy with a microphone in front of my face on the radio who does not have a financial stake in the Kings, trade the pick.
Trade the pick.
I don't care if it's unprotected.
Hey, there are ways in which you can make really complicated trades here and still stay under the luxury tax and still do everything, without losing like the greatest pick ever. But like it costs something in the NBA world in order to get something.
Yeah,
It does.
of course,
It just straight
of
up.
course.
And so yeah, shout out my guy Brett Huff. Me and him were
Big Brett Huff
like
guy.
we're going through trades like this, like just spitballing.
You
Hey,
sent me a whopper the other day.
I can't even remember what I sent you, but
it was an 8-player deal with the Jazz.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, there's a way in which you can trade with the Jazz for John Collins without giving up Trey Lyles, which of course you can either play John Collins and Trey Lyles together, or you can take Trey and try to go trade him for Jonas Valanciunas. And after watching Jonas play with the Wizards the other night, I would take him. Like he's big,
he's a gangster, dude.
Physical. He doesn't mess around. Him and Sabonis are super close. Sabonis described him as a big brother figure, like
great
even
beard.
Before. Yeah, great beard. Looks just like the wood chopping guy in Hoodwinked.
Yeah,
who's the guy who has a schnitzel truck.
Sure.
From Hoodwinked.
Yep.
So
I think you showed me that. I've not seen that movie, but you showed me this.
Yeah.
Which is why I know that.
I would fully take Jonas Valanciunas on the Kings roster just because he's big, he's athletic, he can go get you. I mean, he's a road grader. He's going to get played off the court in certain playoff series, but who cares? That's not what you need to get to the playoffs, and you need someone to back you up. Yeah, and if Sabonis gets hurt or needs to take 3 games off to heal up for something,
that's the other angle to the trade stuff. We're needing more playable players. You also need to insulate yourself from injury,
of course,
and that's another place where the trade stuff comes in.
Yeah.
I just got a text message, and I opened it because the only thing I saw was Kevin O'Connor is hilarious.
Oh no.
I have a fake Steph Curry trade for you from Kevin O'Connor.
Oh.
Can I read it to you before we go to the break?
Yes.
Orlando gets Steph Curry. The Warriors get Anthony Black, Jonathan Isaac, and Cole Anthony. 4 first-round picks and 2 pick swaps.
Okay. Yeah.
Anthony Black, Jonathan Isaac, and Cole Anthony. That's a big thumbs down for me.
Well, that just means you're starting over.
Yeah.
But the problem that you have with those Orlando Magic picks, they're not going to be very good.
Correct, which is why it's a big thumbs down.
Not going to be very good. The same
Magic
reason,
are set up to be awesome for a long time.
Yeah, it's the same reason you don't want to take first-round picks from the Houston Rockets. They have good first-round picks hiding from other teams.
That 2027 Phoenix first-rounder?
You want some of those, but you don't want any of their first-round picks because that's going to be a good team.
Yeah. Yep. Right there with you. All right.